Hello, everybody. Welcome to my Chinese brush painting class today. And today we're going to be exploring peonies, how to paint the buds and how to paint the big petals for the flowers. We'll do some individual flowers and then kind of practicing individual strokes. And then later on, exploring the brushes, exploring how to load them. I have a normal paper in front of me and I have some rice paper, seeing how the different papers behave as well with the paints. And then we'll create a composition. We'll introduce some leaves, we'll practice them, and we'll do an individual composition probably in the second hour. Right, so I'm going to be using some Chinese watercolors. Normal blocks of watercolors are totally fine as well. So I have some rouge, or could have been another color, crimson, okay, and I have some white. So I'm going to have both paints on my palette. Right, if I'll get this white out, got a little bit of a dry end to the tube here. Okay. And to load our brush, I'm going to start with a medium Chinese brush. If you haven't got a Chinese brush, maybe one of the longer bristles, round brush will be good. Okay, so I'll start with a smaller brush and then I'll work with a larger brush afterwards, just to show the difference as well. Now, first of all, just as a recap, when we apply paint and when we use water on a brush, we always get our bristles on the brush kind of lined towards one direction. So we keep turning the brush gently, and we keep we don't do it quite much strokes going kind of wishy-washy left, right, and center, unless if we need to do a specific stroke, or we might want to have that freedom within it. Otherwise, all our bristles start going, unpleasant, and we're not going to have nice, lovely directions of them. So we tend to get the brush strokes one way. Okay. So if I have too much water on my brush, I can have my paper towel ready, and instead of just drying it as we would normally do with, let's say, a watercolor brush, just dabbing it on a tissue. Here, very often, all you need to do is just to use the base of the brush, just to dampen, kind of take that moisture off. So all the paint, because we're going to be loading it in different parts of the brush, the paint will remain where it is. It's just the moisture will be going. Okay. So if that is going to be our next little bit. Okay. So now I'm going to load my brush with my rouge here. So I'll just use the tip of the brush, just gently dipping in it. So if you're using a block, just try to use just the side of the brush without dipping it in the rest of the paint. Okay. So just going to just double check it's how damp it is. Okay, that's okay. So if I were just to put a stroke, just to kind of print my brush, just to, oh, I haven't got enough moisture there, just a tiny bit more. Okay, so I have, okay, my brush is, water is running down because I've got a bit of a slant here. Okay, so if I'll do it that way. So my brush has more paint at the base, sorry, at the tip of it, yeah, and it spreads further down, gets lighter. Let me do it again. It doesn't look quite right. Let me try my larger brush. Let me try my larger brush here. So the same principle at the tip of the brush, a bit more color. Tiny bit more at the tip. All right, hopefully it will do me a nice press. No, I think it's got my papers. My paper is behaving differently. Let me try it that way. Okay, no, okay. Let me check what my paper is going on. Right, so I picked up my old paper, and this is kind of the effect we want to have. So if I'll do it on a normal paper, that should do it as well, but maybe a little bit drier. On the rice paper, it spreads out easier. So if your paint runs, that's lovely. That's okay. Okay. So, and what we want to do, we want to practice a couple of strokes. So if that's what we've just been printing, what I'd like us to do is to place the brush and drag the brush and lift it. Okay, that's a lot of water. Let's do another one on the rice paper. So place the brush, drag the brush, lift the brush. Okay. Lift the brush. Get a tiny bit less water. Place the brush, drag the brush, lift it. Place, drag. Yeah, so I just wanted to do loads. I want you to try maybe individual ones, like long ones. From time to time, I will be topping up my brush, maybe on the tip of the brush, to have a bit more stronger pigment. That's better, nice and dark. The more strokes practice you'll do, the more you will have a feel for the brush, the pressure on the brush, and how much water you need to bring with you. Okay, so those are nice longer strokes. Okay, and again, maybe a shorter stroke, a little one, maybe a press, maybe a drag. Usually peony flowers will have a slightly wider kind of petal, yeah, and then narrow towards the center. And then they will have that curvature towards the center. Yes, we'll have another curvature towards the center. So they will be all kind of coming together. So unraveled, kind of, this is just a little diagram. Yeah, unraveled version. Then the petals will start looking out. Okay. So we'll practice those shapes as well. So this is just an open petal, little stroke. Okay. We wanted to have smaller strokes. So for example, when we'll be painting something in the middle of our peony, and we only see kind of the back of it, just tiny bit of something at the back there, we'll load the brush with more darker colors, and we'll do small strokes, almost like big commas, yeah, as they will kind of come around and around. Okay, I've got too much water here. Again, right, so I'll just do individual stroke first, almost like a comma. Oops. Okay, the shape need to be more like this one. Okay. So let's do almost like just in one go, that little stroke. That's better. Okay, one go the other side. So we can keep practicing maybe an individual stroke. Some of them will end up slightly lighter, some tiny bit more darker. If you pick up the pigment stronger on the tip of the brush, you can have it a little more elongated, sorry, a bit more dark on one side. Okay. My rice paper is wonderfully absorbent. The other one is not doing anything. So you might need to, if you just paint on a normal paper, bring in a little bit more water on your brush. Okay, that's lovely darkness. And then we'll start bringing some of these petals together, as I was trying to put it first of all. So we'll see maybe the closed part of them, one side kind of closer to our side of the petals on one corner. So that doesn't matter if they're, it's even better if they're slightly different in size. And we'll do a couple of strokes at the back, 1 and maybe 2 and maybe 3 here. It's okay to have a gap in between. That's where we can put some of the yellow segments of the flower. I'm going to just do the same. So it could be different variation of sizes of the stroke or different darknesses. Okay, 1. Another front one here. And then 3 at the back. 1, 2, and 3. If they're slightly clustering differently for you, it's okay. Just kind of keep them together, thinking about kind of that bud, kind of how the flower will be opening up as we'll be adding some petals. If I'll do another one here. Quite like the idea of having slightly larger petal here on the right hand side, and then slightly smaller ones at the back, kind of creating the full bud, that lovely semicircle. So it's as if we're looking at the flower from the top. And then we can start adding some more petals, some larger petals as they're opening up. I'm going to have a little bit more space. So again, I'm going to start with a 5. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. Tiny bit more paint here. 5. And then again, I'm going to load the paint. And I'm going to start now introducing some of these petals. They will be a little bit smaller first. So there will be a petal going that way, left or right. I'm going to make this one going up, just a little bit up. And as they're going sideways, I'm going to start getting slightly open. You can start seeing more space between them. Tiny bit more water. And the petals start becoming slightly larger. So that's one is going to be here. We'll keep the brush in such a way so the darker color is on the outer layer of the flower. Okay, tiny bit more water. So in Chinese brush painting, loading the brush if needed for every stroke is very common. It's quite a thing to do. Okay, so I'm going to do another one now, and it's going to start opening up. Okay. So I'm turning the brush. So instead of just painting as we do in traditional European watercolors, we tend to, in Chinese brush painting, tend to the brush all the way around. Okay, so for example, if I'm doing a stroke that way, instead of moving my body across, I will be moving the brush all the way around. Right, just double check I've got enough moisture here. Okay, so I'll move my brush that way. Okay, and maybe I'll do one more, much more open petal, kind of combining it all. It doesn't have to be all combining it, but I've got it all connecting. Okay, so I've got that lovely fluffiness, not quite finished in the center or kind of on the sides, but we can do that. But it's kind of moving the whole brush around the flower, and that will be the tip. If you have gaps kind of between the petals, we can load the brush with a little bit more darker color, and we can just add a couple of petals. Okay, can just add a few more shapes. Don't think I need much here. Actually, didn't have to do that, but it's quite nice as well. Okay. Sometimes if you ended up with a lot of white spaces, which I haven't, in the center, kind of below the smaller strokes, kind of in this area, there are gorgeous strokes you can use to help to see the petals almost kind of flattish, kind of when they're facing you. So the strokes will be kind of going around. So if that is our center of the flower, I've got all our petals coming around this way, yeah, going down. So they're coming right in the center. So those are kind of from smaller strokes getting narrowed to wider ones, how they're overlapping. So those kind of shapes of the strokes we can build up if we've got gaps. So for example, I've got quite a lot of pale color, which is totally fine, could have been fine, but I'm going to put one stroke just to highlight kind of the direction of that flower. Okay, so that's quite a nice peony there. Okay. And I'll just do another one. I'll just do another peony as a little practice. So our small strokes at the front, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the strokes will start coming up at the back. Slightly varying them in size. Maybe one could be just a little dab. You know, sometimes how the peonies flowers just break into individual smaller shapes. Maybe they're a bit more clustered in one area than the other. So feel free to have that playfulness of the flowers, instead of making it very perfect, symmetrical shape. Okay, that's a lovely petal there as well. Maybe one petal is leaning away. Maybe I'll put it that direction first and then work out into that shape afterwards, how it's really leaning out. Yeah. Do these ones a bit more stronger and coming up here. So it's quite a low set of the petals, so it's quite a elongated, kind of an ovally shaped flower, so it's not very round, if it makes sense. So that's when I have very distinguished shapes of the central petals, very distinguished dark tones of the outer petals, but that's when I can do maybe something more for the petals which are right in front of me, using some of these elongated lines and maybe connecting them all together here. That's lovely. Okay. Right, so now we're going to use a similar technique, but we're going to load our brush differently now. So I have some watercolor white, or it could have been a gouache white, or even a dab of acrylic. I've diluted it with some water, and I worked it up into the bristles of my brush. So in this case, we can wiggle the brush a little, but at the end, when we can see that the brush is loaded with enough white, we can start using the strokes, which are just one-way strokes, okay? If you've got too much water, you will have to take some of that water off on the side of your palette, or just use a tissue paper to lift it off. And what I'm going to do next, so I'm going to leave most of my brushes in white, and I'm going to put a third on that brush with some pinky color, okay? And the tip of the brush is going to have very dark color. So I'll start with loading it now with a bit more lighter red. Okay. And then the tip, I'm going to dab kind of just a little bit of that stronger color at the top. Again, I'm going to try that stroke just by pressing. That's brilliant. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of white, some pink, and some very dark color. Okay, and this time, instead of painting with bristles up, we're going to paint with bristles down. Okay, so we're going to do similar strokes, but almost like reversing them. Yes, so I'm going to have one little stroke, maybe a baby stroke to get it together. So I'm doing the same principle as we've been doing now, but because you've got a different handling of the brush now, it will come out slightly different. Okay. And I'm going to start putting the bristles around, sorry, petals around those two shapes, three shapes, petals. And I'm going to put a stroke around it. So they're very different in the size now, but the principle is the same. Okay. My dark red is disappearing from my brush, so I'm going to load it gently a bit more. And I'm going to continue my bristles or my strokes from one corner. It's a little bit there. And pressing it that way. So this is our practice. Maybe I shouldn't have been started working into the whole flower, but the work of the petal is going to be developing up and wiggling the brush kind of widthwise. So you might end up with a petal which has a narrow pointy end, or it might end up almost like a W or kind of a shape upside down. Now, some people find first technique a little bit easier. Some find this one more effective but trickier to do. I want you to try them all and make your own decision eventually. So those are nice shaped petals. Now, if you haven't got white, you can do it as well, but obviously the white carries a little bit more of the color. The water can carry a bit of color, but the white becomes a little bit more effective because it's a bit matte, is not as transparent. Okay. So a smaller petal, maybe a group of petals. Okay, my pinkiness of the paint is moving, so I need to load my brush a bit more with the pink. And we'll also have our petals, obviously, not just all on the top. They will also go and face down. So then I'll change the direction of my brush, might be a little bit easier for you. And then press and wiggle it same way, yeah? Press and wiggle the brush. Okay, that's an individual one. I'm painting them all a little bit separately, but we can put them together in the shape afterwards. Okay, again, the more of those petals you do, you'll have a feel for the volume of the paint you have. Sometimes that separation of the tone from dark to light could stop you from, if you focus on the tones, you stop focusing on the shapes of the petals. So don't worry about if it's not quite light and dark and in between tones. Just focus maybe on the kind of in the size of the strokes. And another stroke will have, so it will be one of those strokes looking down, kind of leaning out from the flower. Put a bit of space for it here. So if I'll start getting it out, it's leaning and it's getting kind of a little bit longer, and then it's coming back. The spaces in between could be filled in afterwards. So it's kind of, we've got that leaning out or left or leaning out right. Okay. So maybe do a number of some of these petals leaning left and some petals leaning right, just to give you, again, maybe the size of the flower, petals, kind of the scale of it. And how shapes will start coming together. And then we'll load the brush. Might ask you to watch me first, then I'll give you some time to do your own version. So what I'm doing again, I'm just loading my brush, loaded it with some white, I'm loading it with some pink, and then on the tip, I'm going to get some darker tone. And I'm going to create the formula for us how to work into a flower. So we start from the smaller petals, which will work, kind of create them the centerpiece first. So I'll do one here. Okay, maybe another one slightly. Okay, wider. Come out a little bit taller than I wanted them, but that's okay. And another one slightly here on the side. Now, if I top up my brush and get some darker color, I can always chop into some of my bigger petals, but I'll do that one maybe shortly here. So I have my brush going now around, and I can chop into some of that, or I can leave it partially gaps. I'll do next stroke. Okay, going kind of again chopping into my smaller petal if I wanted. Okay, it shouldn't be coming back, but I have. Okay. And I can chop into them a little bit more here. Okay, that's better. And another one. Okay, creating a bit more of a shape behind, kind of negative space behind my petals. Okay, that's an overall principle. Okay, we'll do the more creative way of placing the petals, but so far I just want you to understand kind of the rows of them. Okay, and we can have shorter rows, longer rows, do all sorts of things. Okay, then we've got the side petals, and so that's gonna make it come out that way. Okay, and one on the left is going to come out. Okay, and that way. So I have semi-perfect flower with all the petals looking quite straight. So don't worry about that. We'll start bending them afterwards. And what I'll do now, I'll go for a slightly lower row. I might just give myself just a couple of, just to give you an idea what I'm going to be doing. And I want to create kind of the row which is in front of me, in front of those three small petals. And I'll work into them here. So they're a bit more flatter, but they're doing exactly the same form. So they're larger now. Okay. And then I can add maybe one of those leaning out petals, let's say leaning on the left-hand side. So probably somewhere from here. Okay. And the gaps in between could be then filled in. Now I know how much space I've got. I can fill some of those gaps. Okay. And especially the gaps, kind of creating the space for the petals at the front. We'll fill those gaps afterwards. I might put another one leaning out, but not as wide, but it is leaning and turning. And I might have a one petal here going, almost kind of finishing off all the front part of the flower here. And then my wide gaps here will be filled in with some of those. Sorry, I picked up quite a big chunk of paint here. With the strokes we were looking at. Okay, like that. And they showing the layers of the petals looking at us almost. Almost, oops, that's the wrong direction slightly, that's better. Covering all the little gaps. Okay. So inner layer of the smaller petals, and then the outer layer at the back, outer layer at the front, and then how the petals are starting folding in front of us, kind of downwards. Okay. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do your own version. So what we're going to do now, we're going to load the brush from the beginning again. So I have some fresh white all the way to the root of my brush. I'm going to take some pink and make it go kind of halfway through the brush. And then the tip will have some of the stronger red. Okay. And to do the buds, so they're going to have kind of a nice round shape, all of them, kind of all the petals staying together. So we're going to kind of almost enlarge the version of the smaller petals we were working originally. So we'll start doing a larger stroke and seeing how it spreads. And then the rest of the strokes will support it to kind of hold the hold of that ball together. So bear in mind that shape as you paint, as you apply those new petals. So there might be another one somewhere here. Might be another one coming here together. And maybe a little one to connect the piece. You can have slightly different variation of how the tone is spreading. It doesn't matter. Okay, I've got one. Okay, maybe this one come together. If the right hand side is not quite perfectly round, we're going to be doing some leaves, so that will kind of shape it up, so don't worry about it. And maybe I could have a third stroke, almost like closing it all together. Ideally we want 3 strokes or 5 strokes, so I don't think my first one with 4 strokes will be a better one. Okay, so I'm going to do another one. A nice stroke, almost like a big comma, and another stroke to support it to get that roundish shape. And I'll do one more stroke to kind of to conclude it together. Okay, I like that one, but it hasn't got enough darkness on the petals. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Or we can do 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 there. Oops, sorry, we don't see any of that one, sorry. Okay. So they're almost ready for our leaves to kind of to finish that roundness of the form. And there could be small petals as the flower is opening up. So it's almost as you paint and as the stroke happen, sometimes the accidental, let's say, more open view of the bud gives us a lovely shape as the flower is gently opening. It's kind of every time you paint, the strokes dictate how the character of your flower will be. Okay. And if we had a flower with quite a lot of very perfect straight petals, what I'd like us to do next is to have a little bit of playfulness of where those strokes could be going. So for example, the center ones, instead of going all 3 together, okay, can we put them a little bit more that way? Okay, so they getting together in a different kind of how they're leaning towards each other. So they might be going that way. Right, let me get more paint here. Okay. That way. And that way. So it's almost like they as they're opening. Maybe some other strokes will be coming up. Okay, again, tiny bit more color here. 1, and then leaning towards us, towards those 3. Okay, becomes more fun. Right, I'll make this one slightly darker. You can see it better. I'll do it properly on a fresh paper in a moment. Just going to give you an idea of kind of directions. Maybe these ones will be coming same kind of leaning, but maybe lower. So we start creating that character. Maybe this small gap, so instead of perfect kind of rows of them, we can just have smaller shapes we've seen, how they again, they might be going into the flower as the flower is just opening. That's much more natural looking flower. Okay, so we're just bending them a little bit more. Or for example, instead of perfect 2 shapes at the front, we can have one larger kind of going forward and another one much more smaller. Okay, I'm running out of paper and I'm ready to get going for a larger paper. Just a tiny bit more. And then we know some of those leaning out petals could be quite playfully coming here. And I could have had another one leaning down. Yeah, so they're starting turning towards each other more, or leaning much more kind of creating much more kind of groups of 3 petals together. So instead of more or less of them being independent, we'll start getting them twisting gently within the shape. Oh. Right, so I'm going to reload my brush and I'm going to do my main composition, just painting flowers. We'll practice leaves separately before we apply them. So I need to load my brush with some white, softening it enough so all the white goes to the roots, really wiggling it That's it. Maybe a tiny bit more white for me. You'll have a feel for it, how much kind of that milky consistency of the paint you have. We don't want it solid, acrylic solid. We want it just a little bit opaque, just a little bit of kind of milky, chalky consistency there. If you've got too much water, you can always take some of it off. Yeah, it will run, and then you'll know you've got you can control that volume more. Right, and I'm gonna add some halfway through my bristles and my brush. I'm going to have my pink. Okay. And then I'm going to have a little bit of darkness on the tip. You can check it on your paper towel. Paper towel quite often reacts very similarly to rice paper. So if you were to paint on the rice paper, or if you are, that would be a good technique to check it against the tissue. Right, so I'm going to have my big flower somewhere here. I'm going to have a bud somewhere there, and then we'll have a branch kind of framing it all together. So if I'm looking at it this way, in traditional Chinese brush painting, we don't have the pencil sketch to support us, but if I kind of use my hand and kind of look at the brush size and kind of the strokes, it gives me an idea. It also gives me flexibility if I wanted to slightly deviate from my initial, let's say, design. Okay, so I'll start with some smaller strokes, leaning a little bit more forward as we did in the last painting. So slightly overlapping, okay, almost like leaning towards each other. Maybe this one could be a bit more central, and then that one will be leaning towards it there. Okay. Tiny bit more darker tone. And then I'm going to start placing a couple of petals going kind of on the left-hand side and up. Okay, and I want them to kind of come over. So I need a little bit more pink on my brush. The white is dominating at the moment, and slightly darker red. And let's bring it across behind the petals and make it lean a little bit more forward here. Okay, my white is not quite seen on the camera as much, but it's coming out quite nicely. Sometimes it just takes a bit more time for it to settle, and the white will spring back because it will be a bolder, stronger in color. And again, I'm going to get a little bit more stronger red, and maybe go from the other side and go for my petal going all the way across, wiggle it. Okay, and then again maybe another one going all the way across, leaning it even more towards the left, and then wiggle it. Okay. There could be more petals at the back we could be seeing, so that will offset some of our whites as well. So I'm going to do a little bit, try not to go too high, otherwise I'll end up with a huge size flower. But that will allow me to create maybe next layer. And again, try not to make them overly too parallel to each other, so it's not going to be just repeating the same shape. So then these ones might be going slightly different direction here. Okay, bit abrupt, so I'm going to add another one here. That's it. So the top layer of petals, because the base of them is dark, it started to create a new line of highlights of the petals below. Tiny bit more darker red on my brush. And I'm going to do a nice petal right in front of, so in a way, I'm kind of building up the height of the flower. I'll do the sides later on because I need to know how many I'll end up with how many layers. So I'll do the nice big round kind of more open petal for us. So it's going to go all the way across here, nice and wide. Okay. And I'll do another one, but maybe starting somewhere here. It just makes my flower looking much more open. Okay, I'm happy with that. Again, a little bit more paint on the brush. Getting ready for some of those larger petals, the side petals, so I need to make sure I have enough moisture, but at the same time I'm controlling the volume of water for it's not to be too runny. And I'm going to do one petal looking down, and then I'll do some side ones. So that's gonna go nice and dark. I'm pressing on the brush quite a lot so I can have my petal quite large here, like this. And then it allows me to have a feel of where how my other petal is going to lean out. Okay, maybe even turn it that way a bit more. That's it. Okay, that's used quite a lot of paint and a lot of moisture. And then I'm going to bring all of this one together now. So this leaning out petal is now going to have a neighbor, which will kind of bring everything to the towards the center. Okay. And also I can continue those rows. Now I know where that part of the flower is going to be finishing. Okay. Can even chop into the petals as we did before if we wanted to see them. A shape more standing out more. As a negative space, so I'm just going to load my brush again. My petals started to be a little bit too dark. And then I'll do another stroke to support this side. A bit of that darkness again. And I'm going to fill now this corner. Might not need to have as big petal now, but at least I know that's going to be a slightly border shape. That's nice. And to make the flower a little bit more, I think, balanced. I think I've got nice dark strokes here, but this end ended up slightly lighter. So I'll put a couple of strokes just to show there is something else going on there as well. I have quite a bit of an open space here. I can fill it in, but I think I'm going to the opposite. I'm going to add a slightly darker petal behind here. I think that will offset my other petal at the side. Really like that. And then I have those long central, kind of in the center strokes, so very long, can make them slightly darker. I need to be careful. I've done quite a good job here, so I'll make them maybe smaller than in my other approaches. Okay, maybe small here. They're kind of, they're picking up those shadows. Okay, or they might also help to shape the kind of the roundness of the overall central part of the flower. Okay, just spotted this looks a little strange. That's it. I like that nice darkness. I think I'm going to encourage it from the left-hand side here as well. Okay. Right, some of them ended up a little bit more like lines, so let's just turn them to more shapes, as if I were to just darken parts of the petals. That's a common way of creating shadows and peonies. Once the big petals are done, adding some very dark tones to get those little groups of petals organized a bit more, kind of united them all together. Okay, I'm happy with that. And then I'm ready to do my bud. Again, I need some more white. And some pink. And some darker red as well. I think I want to have 2 buds. I'm going to make one here. Usually it's a 3 is a number, the 5 is a number, the 7. So quite a good one to use. So I'm going to have a nice big stroke, and the rest of the strokes are going to be supporting it. Okay, so maybe I'll do this one as a 5-stroke bud. Okay, maybe one will come here. So stroke 2, and almost like a little one here. tiny bit more darkness. So that's 3, and then 4, and the little one there's 5, and then I can just kind of summarize them together as when the leaves come in. Does look quite semi-open. Maybe I will do another supporting one here. Quite like that. Oh, that's a wonderful opening up flower, actually. Maybe very narrow. That's it. So that's my little interpretation of my strokes here. Bud. So opened up bud. Now I'll have a closed up bud. So the petals went slightly bigger and wider, but I love that anyway. Okay, so now I can decide where I want to put my smaller bud. I think I will put it somewhere here. So if you kind of give yourself an idea, or maybe here, I could have put it in there, I could have put it another somewhere here. Yeah, it will give slightly different dynamics. And you can be brave. I'd like you to be brave and give it a try, face in a different directions. Okay, I think I'll put one here. One stroke, another stroke, 3, 4, 5. That's it. So how the brush goes round, it tells us that form, it shows that volume without painting, light and shadows. Now there are different ways of doing leaves for different plants, and there are different ways of painting even leaves for the peonies. Overall, one principle. I'd like to kind of for you to try a couple of styles and see which one you prefer. So first of all, I'm going to load my brush with a lighter color. So that's my yellowish green. If you haven't got it, maybe just a yellow. And then we can mix it with a little bit of indigo in a moment. So again, I'm loading the brush, so all of it is going to be within that yellow, within that lighter green. Okay. It's too much water. Some of it will come off. Okay. And like we did with red, I'll put a little bit more indigo on the tip of my brush. That's quite a strong Chinese indigo, quite intense in color. So if I do a stroke, kind of print it, it gives me quite a nice bold darkness. But the strokes for the leaves will be different, obviously, than the flower petals, although the loading is very similar. So instead of doing kind of a longer strokes as we did for the petals, or kind of the top or the bottom, we're going to drag the brush now a little bit more sideways. So that's going to be a sideways stroke. Okay. So then the width of the painting is developing in a different way than for the flowers. So that's going to be my maybe a longer leaf. It's almost like a little box or a little block. Okay, we'll start with some shorter ones. Gonna have some smaller ones on the sides. So that's kind of a group of 3 leaves in a way. So we're just dragging the strokes sideways. The top of my brush. So I put my paint in my brush. And again, I can make them quite squarey, almost like roses, kind of more wider leaves will be painted that way. Or I can stretch it a little bit longer. Okay. And make the shapes of the leaves slightly elongated. Okay. And more importantly than kind of the width of the leaves, it's how the leaves positioned next to each other. So that, for example, it's a group of 3 leaves, it's a group of 5 leaves, it's a group of something, yeah, 7 leaves. How much space is it between them? How much they overlap in each other, and that will be more exciting. Or how they will start turning. So for example, this group of 3s could be now, for example, a wider stroke and a bit more narrow to the bottom. Maybe next leaf is going to be really close at the front, and the other leaf might be quite a narrow part there. We only might be seeing a section of it, kind of the side almost view of it. Okay, we don't do any veins yet. We'll come back to the veins. If the leaves are looking towards us, we'll have them facing towards us. I've got my bristles molting. So that will be a leaf looking towards me. It doesn't have to have a pointy end. It might do something narrowing down, but it doesn't have to have a pointy end. Okay, and then my other leaves might be one here, maybe one somewhere here. So they're slightly different shapes, slightly different position towards each other. So these kind of shapes, if we see them face kind of quite open, okay. My colors come out very bold green, very dark contrast next to it with that indigo. That indigo is quite full of blue and emerald green. I think that's quite a classic Chinese indigo color. But as long as you'll have something light and dark, you could be painting this with black inks as well, the same principle. So now I'm going to do a slightly different technique of the leaves. So the same loading, but I'm going to drag the leaves from the tip towards the center. So they will have a little bit more like these ones, a bit more elongated tips. So it's also will have like a little bend in it. So a little drag and a little turn, okay. And then the next leaf, kind of that's, you know, the second and the third part. So one might be almost somewhere there, but you're not going to even see much. Another one could have a bit more, I think I want a bit more width to it, and it could have more of a width to it. I think that's ended up a little bit too narrow for me. I think how the dark tone came up. It's highlighted its turn. Okay, let's do it again. Let's do it again. So leaning it that way and turning it, okay. And then I'm gonna have that a bit more of a pointy leaf. And I think I'm gonna do another one as 3-part leaf. I think that's what it is. Almost like our almost like part of our flowers petals. You know, when each, so we can have a leaf going like that. So that's where those leaves, and this leaf will have a little sub shape to it. Yeah, it's almost like one shape, second shape, third shape. Okay. Let's have it. Let's see how it will be leaning that way. So if we just do individual leaf first, and it could expand slightly on one side and much more on the other side. Okay, that's quite a nice peony leaf. Yeah, I think these sharp ends may be a bit too strong in contrast. This becomes quite complex, but it doesn't have to be complex. Strokes as the first ones we were doing, that will be totally fine, absolutely fine. Okay. And we can also load a little red with our green, because the peonies, kind of the strong pigment from the flower, also travels within the leaves or some of the stems. So if I load it with my lighter green and have a tiny bit of red in the tip, okay, that would be quite nice for some of them branches. Yeah, when you can start having quite exciting green and red, yeah, strokes, a little bit wiggly. So instead of just doing a flat straight line, kind of doing little junctions and stopping and zigzagging them and stopping. Yeah. I love that combination of light green and red. You can have some smaller branches by loading a little bit more red or a little bit more green, either would be fine. So they have almost like those little bends in each little corner. Now the rice paper does a marvelous job with it, same as Chinese brush, especially if you paint with a brush kind of, well, 90 degrees vertically to the paper. It's just so much easier rather than leaning it kind of sideways. Well, at least I find it much easier. Then you're only using the tip of the brush, yeah, and it's just much easier to kind of have that control of the line. So if those are branches, but we can also have a little bit of red on our leaves. So if I picked up some green and red, any of those strokes, yeah, will be totally fine as well, with a little bit of extra color on them. So plain with the line will be fantastic. Getting that quirkiness of the line will be really, really wonderful to experiment with. And we're going to do some small strokes for the veins. I quite like my watercolor brush, the finer. It's not a tiny one, but it's a smaller watercolor brush. And we can go all for indigo, or we can go for red, or we can just vary them, maybe even mix the color. Both are fine. So a darker color, and the first thing we do, so if I look at the simplified leaves here, we'll do a main vein, and then we go quite roundish shapes, veins for the sides. The opposite side of the veins don't match, so they don't match like a fishbone like that, okay? They will start being one higher than the other, and they're going to kind of support the shape of the leaf. So if it's a narrow part of the leaf is finished, then it's going to be narrow, maybe even finish it. You know, where how my strokes, my veins come out from the leaf, it's almost looks like I've gained the highlight on my leaf here. I've gained an extra space in there, okay? Let's do another one. If this vein could go more facing me, should have done it slightly darker first. Okay. And this one might have just a bend in it, and we only see the veins on one side. The more you relax your hand and the more samples you do, the easier they will get to you. The more you're going to kind of worry about it, the less spontaneous they look. Okay, so just keep practicing your veins on the leaves. They create that beautiful, beautiful character immediately. If you're not too happy with the shapes of the leaves, sometimes we practice, but another style of the leaf, kind of veins, works extremely well, is when we outline the whole shape. So for example, I outline the whole shape of the leaf. Okay, all shape of the leaf, and then at those veins, they become a little bit more natural. Okay, something happened. My pen didn't run enough. That's better. So those more close to rose shapes, or some of the peonies when the kind of petals run down. So what you can do, you can't mix styles. If you prefer one style to another, you have to do the same leaf style for the whole painting, okay? So you can't start doing these ones and then you can outline them all at the end if you didn't like them, yeah, or something. But if you decided to do them outlining with an outline and then suddenly you stop doing it, that's not going to be quite the right painting. Right, if we've got more complex ones, they could have same veins, but sometimes they could have extra bodies, kind of extra shapes, yeah, to support that form as well. But I like to keep things simple, so even if I've got a complex form, I'll keep it simplified here. I love those little white dots at the top of the leaves. That gives it another character. Yeah, it's almost like there's highlights on the tip. So find what's works for you or what you prefer to give it a try, yeah? And we're ready to put some of our leaves together with our flowers and some branches. Right, so my plan is to put some of the leaves a little bit on the side below my peony, kind of supporting my buds here. Maybe a couple of leaves next to the bud, and then possibly some of the leaves coming down from the top, from the branch above. So I'm going to use that larger brush again, load it with lighter green, yellowy green. Okay. I'm going to go for simplified shape leaves because I want my flowers to stand out more than I want the flowers to support my leaves, leaves to support my flowers. Right, so let's do a couple of leaves. I think I've got a bit of space here. Let's start from it here. So I'll have a big central shape. Okay, I'm just dragging it down. I've got a second side one. I'll have a third one side one. Okay. I'll have another leaf going one way here, and it's always will have three kind of parts to it, another one and another one. Even if I wanted to add a very small, very tiny one, it will still consist of groups of three. 1, 2, 3. I think I need something to support it, maybe a little bit more here on the left. So I'll start with a baby shape and then a central one and another one somewhere here. So I'm just dragging instead of flat straight drags, what I've been doing, which I have done it here. Some of them are just done up, some of them are done sideways, but it's just the same type of drag. A couple of those pointy ones are just almost just placed, a couple of strokes. What I will need to do around the bud is, remember we said, is kind of getting it together, keeping it together. So some whites underneath of it, might just put a couple of strokes, which will hold the whole piece, maybe kind of that green leaf petals, which surround the bud. Okay, that's will be my version of it. It's perfect square here. I'm just going to break it down here. That's better. While we're at the buds, I'll put a couple of small leaves around my smaller bud at the bottom, if you've got one. So that might give you an idea of how individual buds could be supported with the green. So what I've done a medium stroke on one side, a larger stroke here, and a tiny baby one on the side. So that's kind of, it's surrounded it. Well, that's doesn't have to be in threes, but that's kind of not much leaves, but it's more of that cradle for the flower itself. Okay. And now I'm ready for some leaves for my peonies. Now I want to start adding a little bit of red to my green. So I'll just bring it in your view. So my green is not going to be as extra fresh. It's lovely to see the fresh green next to the buds, but then we might have a slight change of color as we paint it elsewhere. So I'm going to do a few leaves this side. Okay, 1 and 2 and 3. Again, load my paint with some more. So my brush with some more paint. And maybe I'll do a small version of the leaf, 1 and 2 and 3. It's kind of leaning it. Yeah, maybe somewhere at the back, maybe we only see the top of it. Directing all of that view towards the larger bud. And then I want maybe making a connection with these 2 flowers. So another leaf here and here and here. And again, kind of getting them together as a larger branches. Okay, I just need to move my camera a tiny bit lower so you can see better. 1 and 2 and 3, because I want them to be supporting each other. 2 and 3. And maybe a small one, small group. And again, before, I know I'm quite happy to decide on the leaves on this side, but I want to have that connection maybe here. So while I've got the yellowy green and red, I'll bring a couple of larger leaves, maybe connecting here. Maybe there will be more leaves on the branch here for me. And I also want to balance my yellow, green and indigo color leaves here. So maybe I'll put some more of those color leaves there. Okay, 1, 2 and 3. And some more sideway here. 1, 2, 3. And some more, 2 and 3. That's good. These ones need a little bit of support again. Gorgeous. Rain out of my light green. Okay, light green and again maybe red for me. For another shape here, so it's not too empty. Okay. Right, tiny bit more leaves at the top, and then we're ready for the veins and the branches. So tiny bit more of that green and red. I want a couple of leaves at the top of the painting here. Want to bring the branch there, a little bit overhanging, kind of connecting it all together. Okay. And maybe a large shape, that's the one. And some of these leaves will be going towards my smaller bud again, so they come in together. Sometimes we can add extra leaves as we've done the branches. I can see that bud hasn't got enough leaves to support it. 1, 2, 3. There we go. That's better. I'm happy with that now. Okay, now we're ready for the branches and the veins. I'll use the red again with a lighter green, but red is going to have more of a dominated darkness, and maybe later on I'll use a bit of indigo as well. So green is there still, and I use the tip of the brush. So I quite like maybe putting that connection between the branch, between the flowers a bit more here. Okay. That branch will come out. Bit of indigo. Okay. Coming out across. And how we can break it down into other smaller shapes of the branches. This one could go slightly more with the red. That's it. Little wider kind of happy dots. Classic in Chinese brush painting. Little widenings of the stems. And I'll have one branch maybe slightly wider, might go for a little bit of darker red and indigo for my peony here. So I'll just drag it somewhere behind. Okay, so I might just have that support here. And it doesn't have to kind of show where it connects to the flower, but the sub branches will be lovely to see how they're kind of their little marks and their little work, intricate webs, how they create the pattern here. And again, don't forget those slightly darker red or darker indigo, little indentations on the branches. That's nice. And once we've done the kind of the branches, might make my second one slightly wider here. We'll do the veins. I think I'll do this one just slightly wider here. And it's slightly darker in tone as well. I think that's better. Gives that a bit more weight to it as well. Right, and then smaller brush. So it could be both your indigo, it could be your red, it could be both, almost like black looking color. Right, and let's start here in the center. It's quite wet here, maybe I'll start. Yeah, I'll start here. Okay. And quick veins for the side leaves. You don't have to do a lot of veins. Sometimes 4 or 5 lines per leaf is plenty. I'll also start connecting them to the branches, or partially connecting them to the branches. Okay. So these ones looking away from us, towards us. This one's sideways. Little leaves might only have a couple of lines. So they don't have to have a lot. But it gives a beautiful style. The more confidently you apply the strokes, the easier they become for you. Just want to add a little bit of extra lighter color here for another small group of leaves. Okay, fabulous. They're springing to life now. Now these ones are going that way. These ones might not have many veins because they're only seen sideways as well. These are beautifully leaning down. Okay, get in there. Bit more paint. And now the leaves here right above my peony. Okay, not forgetting this little one. They all need to have that, even partial veins, even if we can't see as many sides of them. So this is quite a repetitive task, but each leaf is slightly different. You will have your own shapes to work with. Just be careful not to overdo the volume or the darkness of the leaves. So maybe just keep it a little more kind of bringing the whole work together. Yeah, those veins. Almost there. I'm going to connect my bud. Here we can just see where it could have been connected with the larger leaves and where the stalk for it could have been. So just done that, just with a couple of brown strokes. I think that's done. I don't have to do the veins on the bud unless if you do them very, very pale. But yeah, I think I'm going to leave that one out there. I think that's all good. Fantastic. Right. Any other happy dots with maybe fresher red, maybe on some of the leaves, maybe alongside of some of the veins or any other branches, kind of almost like full stop, so a little bit of focal point makes them slightly more alive. Okay, I quite like that there as well. Showing that, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect flower, you know, it's alive. There might be decay, there might be different shadows, there might be little caterpillars growing and eating something, or maybe just how that pigmentation of the color comes through differently. And the final touch up I'm going to do is a small amount of yellow. I'm going to add. So I've just squeezed a little bit of yellow on my plate, my palette, and I'm going to use it quite thick. So it's almost like acrylic. So very little water, quite thick. I'm going to dab it. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on my camera. In the center of my larger flower, kind of between our earlier stage petals, I'm going to create a little bit of that yellow space. Can go over some of the red petals. I can go over the white space there. So I'm just going to dab it on top. We can mix it with a hint of white to make it kind of go over the red a bit more stronger. I think I'm going to do that. That's better. Yeah, it just settles easier on top. This might be a little bit small for you to see on the screen. We don't usually do anything for the buds, so that stays here. And if I can mix my lightish kind of yellowish white color with a dab of indigo, I'll have a very pale kind of yellowish green, and I can do a small, almost like a little dot or like a larger oval in the center of my greens, or on the top of my greens. I'll zoom it in for you in a moment. That's, again, just gives that very much greener, fresh green stem within the peony centerpiece. Let me just make it a little bit more zoomed in. On the screen there, so somewhere. Okay, so we can see a little bit more of that area, slightly bolder. How the stamen and the contrast of the petals next to each other creates a beautiful, very delicate flower. Right, so we're going to stop at this. Let me zoom out again for you to see the full picture. Thank you very much for today. Been very patient, and I look forward to seeing your paintings at different stages. You might like a specific area, you might like the bud, you might like the leaves, you might need to practice other things. It might be you've done a completely different composition. I just want you to give it a go, play with your strokes, and explore that natural build-up, very organic build-up of peonies.